We'll bring you the latest on those attacks as soon as we have more information, but certainly a story that is developing at this hour. Middle East tensions escalating, explosions heard in Tehran as the US and Israel launch a preemptive attack against Iran. We'll give you the latest on that as it unfolds. We see a lot of reaction on social media pertaining to that, with the US President Donald Trump, of course, saying bombs will be dropping everywhere. Let's see what Iran's response will be towards that as well. That's a story we'll certainly be watching for you throughout the course of the day. Let's go to other news for now. But before we do that, we were scheduled to be joined by the KwaZulu-Natal Premier Tammy Ntuli a bit earlier on the State of the Province address yesterday. Unfortunately, we're not able to connect with him. We've been unsuccessful with that, so we do apologise. We'll try to speak to him at a later stage when we can. All right, let's go to other news now. The South African Revenue Service has clarified that social media influencers and content creators must declare all forms of income for tax purposes, including cash payments, free products, services and sponsored travel perks. SARA says influencers are classified as independent contractors or small business owners, meaning these earnings must be reported as part of their gross income. For more on this, we speak to Sibongile Khumalo, as a chartered accountant and registered tax practitioner. So Sibongile, thank you so much for joining us. And we were chatting off air a bit about this. I guess a lot of clarification is needed on this. If you're on X, if you're on Facebook, you'll know that there are many people who have monetized some of their accounts, and there's some deals, there's endorsements. You have a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
All of that means that you have to declare it now.
Basically.
And you've got to declare, that means you've got to pay some money towards SARS.
Well, it depends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about that. I also need clarification on this part.
All right, sure. Thanks, Criselda. So basically, you're a normal taxpayer, or you're part of the taxpayer pool base, whether you're earning income from social media or from a 9-to-5, right? So you basically put that, you have to tell SARS and say, I earn this income. Whether you pay tax on it or not depends on if you're above the threshold. Right, so you have up until 95,000 rand, 95,750 before you actually start to pay tax. So it's not to say that you'll definitely pay tax, but SARS says you need to declare, because if you don't, you face up to 50% in penalties.
Wow.
Yeah.
So all of this means, and I know this will be something very talked about on social media. Yeah. So this would be if you're being paid to promote whether it's some goods or an event, whatever it is. If you've got a YouTube channel, if you are, basically if you're making any money above the threshold that you spoke about. There was a lot of confusion a bit about that. And I think that this was something that was not clarified much previously. I don't think maybe SARS had anticipated that we would reach this point where you have these influencers who are making money this way.
100%. So I think it's not only cash, it's also in kind. Anything that you receive and you're expected to maybe post about. So in exchange, right? Okay. So whether you're going on trips or whether you're receiving items or gifts that you have to put on or discuss, or basically brands, right? So brands that send you things and you basically share information or your experience on them. You have to declare that money, right? So if it's a trip, how much would you have paid if you went on that trip by yourself? So you have to almost estimate as well how much that benefit cost you, or cost the company that basically gave you. And that's your income, essentially.
And I mean, now that there is much clarification on this, what happens to someone who's been doing this for years and now you're being told you have to declare, or anything that you post about, or this YouTube channel that you've started, you know, you have to start paying on that. What happens? I know there's the voluntary disclosure program.
Correct.
Yes. Am I now exempt? Do I start now? What happens in an instance like that? Are there penalties that will still apply? Do we know?
I think SARS is much kinder to someone who voluntarily comes forward and uses the VDP system to declare and say, for the past couple of years, I've been an influencer. You only came out as SARS last year, September, to tell me that actually the money that you're making or the gifts that I'm receiving is actually income, and this is how much I've made as an estimate. And I think I read SARS would take it case by case, but I would think they would be more lenient, and I'm not too sure about SARS's intention to go after social media influencers for the past, you know, before September the 5th, right? But right now you can't plead the 5th and say you don't know as of 2026, but you can probably negotiate with SARS about the past because you didn't know, or
and maybe escape some penalties. I
maybe
don't know.
escape, yeah. So I think it will be interesting to see how SARS actually approaches the past income that a social media influencer would have made, as opposed to whatever they are currently making.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a rapid growth, you know, in content creators. You know, I mean, what does compliance then mean? You've touched on it quite a lot. Compliance, and obviously, you know, will we start seeing like more audits, for example, you know, on or penalties in this particular space? Because it certainly looks that way. It's not a bad thing to pay your taxes, of course not.
It's not.
But I mean, because of a country such as ours, not just ours, where you know, there are a lack of jobs, people have decided to go out and
100%.
go out and open YouTube pages or start channels and generate an income for themselves. So how do you balance that? And maybe let's talk about compliance and what is it that one needs to do actually?
Okay, so we start with the declaration part, right? And then to better comply, you need to keep records of all your invoices, whatever you're paying, right? Because the income aspect is very easy to verify for SARS. I mean, we see you post. So you can't hide and say, I didn't make this money or I didn't generate this income. But when it comes to then determining how much you might owe SARS, you could benefit from relief that come from deductions that you are allowed to make. And you need to keep records of all your documentation for at least 5 years, right? So anything you under-declare, you open yourself up for potential penalties, right? So the main thing is to declare. Whether you end up paying or not is a different story. And I like to add practical tips for people and say, okay, cool, you're declaring, right? And sometimes you're not actually receiving cash, but in the event where you are receiving cash, take a portion of that and put it away, right? And make a savings account for yourself, because I think the challenge with compliance is not only declaring, but it's also in paying, right? Because then you struggle to pay, and then you could earn interest and penalties on whatever you haven't paid, which is payable. So I would say declare, have proper record keeping of everything that you either receive or pay, and make sure that you create a reservoir for yourself. Right?
In the event that you're told to pay up.
Exactly. So that you don't have to now figure out how to pay for money that you don't have actually. Right?
And in fact, before we continue with our conversation, we'll just bring you that breaking news that you see our colleagues have just put up on your screen there. Iran retaliating, of course, on the airstrikes that had been launched by the United States. Iran launching an attack that landed in Israel as part of revenge. We're expecting the story to continue throughout the course of today, in particular after the sentiments that were shared. Iran retaliating, the tensions escalating in the Middle East, you know, after the United States of America and Israel launched attacks on Iran. Reports, you would know, saying that the attacks were directed at Tehran and have caused huge damage. The attack coming after the US, you would know, it assembled a fleet of fighter jets and warships in that region to try and pressure Iran to agree to a deal related to its nuclear program. So that's what this is about. Earlier, President Donald Trump announcing that the US are carrying out that major combat operation in Iran. Now the breaking news, Iran retaliating and Iran launching an attack that landed in Israel as part of revenge. So that's what we're going to see throughout the course of today. This is now the response that we're getting from Iran. A little bit earlier on, you would recall when we spoke to SABC News specialist correspondent Sophie Mukwena, I'd asked her about these escalating tensions in the Middle East. What does it mean? Has Iran said or responded as yet? Now we see that breaking news that we have on our screen. It's certainly a story that we're going to continue to monitor for you over the next couple of hours. Let me come back to you, Sibongile. Thank you so much for your patience as we try to navigate this breaking news. So, I mean, you know, sometimes for TikTokers, there's also TikTok. I see a lot of our content here on the SABC literally stolen. That's what I'm going to say. It's stolen and put on TikTok. There is, you would have seen a lot of news organizations now using a watermark. Yes. All of this, taking our content, putting it on TikTok, that's where you generate your revenue as well. I mean, talk to us a bit about that. And, you know, when we talk about compliance, that's also going to apply there. And possible, you know, expenses or penalties that might come into effect if one does not declare all of this.
Yeah, I think if content creators use other people's material, they can get copyright striked, obviously. So that could limit how much money that they actually end up earning on a particular post, right? So it's all relative, but whatever it is that you actually receive or earn is what you declare, right? So that can be under a different law. Other people end up not being able to earn on social media because they take other people's material. So SABC could say, nope, we actually don't want you to be clipping our videos and circulating them without our permission. So
but how do you even get to some of these individuals? I know that we've had one of those challenges very recently where how do we safeguard our content? You would see now that there is an SABC watermark on our content, and there's been a lot of, I guess, a number of strikes would mean then the person's account. Some of the people that you're dealing with are faceless. Some of these organizations, we don't even know who they are, where they're based. So that's going to be another challenge, I presume.
I would assume that as well. I think people can hide and not declare that actually this is my social media account, right? Especially if you're not required to submit your real name or an ID number. So SARS relies on honesty and trust, right? The voluntary tax system, which we follow here in South Africa, depends on us as taxpayers to actually come forward and say, actually, I make this money. Apart from that, SARS might not know. Yes, they might get better using AI in terms of detecting that this is actually a bot versus a real person, or this is Sibongile behind 3 accounts. That's actually managing this main account. They could get that information.
And that is the
eventually.
instance where you see, especially with bots, if there's a so-called attack on whether it's a company or an individual's, and you could clearly see that there becomes it looks like one person who's tweeting from 3 different accounts. But anyway, thank you so much. I'm much more enlightened about all of this because I was asking myself questions about, okay, so how's this going to work? Because people have been these influencers for a couple of years, and how's it going to work with the obligations that they now have towards the Revenue Service? Thank you very much indeed. We do appreciate your time. Chartered accountant and registered tax practitioner Sibongile Khumalo speaking to us there.